Hello, everyone. Good morning and good evening. Wherever you are joining us from, welcome back to the third night of the Terran Summit, a platform for artistic resistance, radical thought, and collective imagination beyond the confines of borders and markets. My name is Erfan Riosi, and I am the co-curator of this year's summit alongside Una, Matisse, and Yerede. This edition is proudly co-organized by BO, the Association of Visual Artists, Oslo, and the New Center for Research and Practice. Tonight, we are honored to host Renzo Martens, a provocative artist, researcher, and activist whose work persistently confronts the colonial entanglements of art institutions and the economies that sustain them. In his lecture, What's Up with Renzo Martens, attempting to connect museums to the plantations that funded them, 2010 to 2025, Martens will guide us through 15 years of interventionist practice, beginning with the founding of the Institution for Human Activities and continuing through his collaborations with the Congolese Plantation Worker Art Collective, CATPC. Together, they have not only reshaped who gets to speak through the language of contemporary art, but have materially reclaimed land, memory, and legitimacy. Martin's work is not simply a critic, it is a blueprint for reversing the flow of extraction, for decolonializing the white cube, and for building transnational solidarity between plantation workers, artists, and institutions alike. Please join me in welcoming Renzo Martens to the Terran Summit.
Thank you so much, Erfan. This is really great to be here. Thank you. I looked at the lineup and also from what you say now, it's it's a very interesting setup that you made, and also that it's so it's a Tehran Summit. It's online. There are a lot of factors that make me interested in what you're doing at large, beyond what I can share with you today. I will indeed. The lecture is called "What's Up with This Renzo Martens," and then I'll speak a little bit indeed of this attempt to connect plantations with the museums that they funded. But I will mostly speak about another group of people, and then you mentioned them, the Congolese Plantation Workers Art League, and that is indeed why. I ask, what's up with me? Like, who am I to sit here? Who am I to speak? Why would I be speaking at all? Which is, of course, one of the key questions in this day and age, who gets to speak? And what would somebody like me, I'm a white, male, 51-year-old, cis European artist, why would I even participate in any types of these debates? I will start with, if you don't mind, sharing a short video that was recently shown at the Venice Biennial and a number of other places and locations. And it's a video written, produced, directed, etc., by CATPC, the Congolese Plantation Workers Art League. It just takes maybe, oh, let's check. Excuse me, I need to do it differently. I apologize, it'll take a second. This one. Let's just check if it works. Do you see the video? Yeah. Okay. So this video is 9 minutes, and I'll speak more later, obviously.
Hey! Bekwisa. Do mufungisa bena mdosha mulalo ya bekwisa. Wa. Dogono mafuku porter plainte na mama Joanne. Nous avons mpembe ngoya ya media mutoka bankaka na betu. Na nyonstu yoyai. Okay, bete funda yo, boye kanga yo, il faut faire luta na ginzonji.
Inzonzi benu telama mama zwani ke kota.
Inzonzi yoyai, nani mefunda?
Madame la juge, en tout cas, merci. Dikambuyo kia kubumba fe, ba témoin kele, mbakumpi kele, ma maître Bilanga, a témoigné nyonso mtindo kele vraiment, en tout cas, ngege na ndinga, maître Bilanga.
Matondo mama zwani, nzo ya mpembeke na mutoki ya bantu wa plantation, mama zwani, yo me manisa mitoki. Awa betu me vandila osana kufunda yo bambongo me kanga makuna na biteki, madame la juge nge futudila betu yo, kima betu me vandila yo, betu ke kinga nge zenga. Matondo mama zwani.
Wapi bavokanzo yai? Bavokanzo yai kele?
Inga mama zwani, ukele. Lefu mama zwani, munu yani yai.
Baka ndinga.
Matondo mama zwani. Yambu yai. Ya lemba macheka shama. Namba kuna yandi. Nabangwa nkashina yene ketuba yau kele mfunu vei. Nzo ya mpembe yai. Yau ke nata inite. Mfukisa ya bantu. Bisalu. Ekonomi. Mshekami ya bambongo kinyos ke natisa bantu nantwala. Samu lanki boso sokufayo.
Wapi batemwanzo yai? Batemwanzo yai kele?
Munu mama mungulu. Auditeur ya tabak. Munu me butuka na 1931. Tala mukongu mpilo me kumaka. Tamu na kisalu yai. Betu me souffrir mingi. Tamu na nzo yai ya mpembe.
Mama, betu me mwana mpashi. Betu me souffrir sa muna kauchu mama. Karabo me so esa kironge esa la veboze ya tala munu diboko. Tala munu dikulu.
Mu mama kafe. Me mwana mpashi na kisalu muna kafe. Me mwe beneficia na ove. Me kuisa nge baka solution ya inzo yai.
Le waiki baza bénéficiaire ya pasi na biso, donc waiki baza ennemi na biso en quelque sorte.
Batemwa yankaka kele?
Mama zwani ndinga.
Baka ndinga.
Lefu mama. Mono ke kuituka yai kele kulutisa nge ntangu ya mpamba. Nzo ya mpembe yai. Kele kusalisa munu metuba yonte eti awa. Inkimbi ya nzo yai ya mpembe kele kusala. Au kulutisa nge ntangu ve na kinzonzi yai. Nge kutela jambu yai mbote. Pau kupesa kidimbu. Dev. Munu kundimande. Nzo ya mpembe ikele yambi. Kana kele ve mfungu. Mama zwani mukelomba ndinga.
Baka ndinga.
Mubanza mbutakisenu melomba kidimbu. Bref yo ina. Mba kukutanyila betu wa betu nyosu na kinzonzi. Matondo. Bampangi betu ketanga. Preuve ya papa Kasiama Mathieu. Betketala na tête moderne kele kana sucre ya kusalamaka na Brazil. Betuketala na ledi lever kele mafuta ya ngasi na beto ya Congo kutungisaka mizei na kuna. Betke kwisa na van AB kele tabak na Indonesia. Mezei na kele tabak mutume tungisa yo mutoki ya bambuta na betu. Na sterling kele plantation na Indonesia. Kele plantation na Indonesia. Kele mizei na ya betu kwaku mekwenda kufulusa kuna. Vraiment sambu na makambo ya papa Mathieu Kasiama. Betu memona yo ba preuve kele. Yo kele ya masonga. Merci.
Kita. Mungu kele yawa.
Tala bisalu.
Bongo yai. Yange.
Mais exposition sans na décolonisation.
Exposition à décolonisation na makambo ya ibetu kezo décoloniser yo yange ko corrompre mon.
Non, bongo ke mingi yo tasalisa beno sambo.
Ça la décolonisation na mbongo ya mvindu ya travail forcé.
Mete bilanga
la corrompre mon yo mesimba fe. Yo mesimba fe.
Na kwa na mazwani.
Na mbongo fe kumona pe mpashi.
Nzo yake na bafuka na betu mabulu meti mukwa banda ntama na bankaka na
betu. Yo ke pobilina nzo ya
institution fait salama. En plus ku vilave bome kanga kiteki ya balo na kasho yoke vanda mpika na kati ya nzo yango yai to mitifike yikama kana wuyikama osike kiteki na ke sacré yo fe futuka yoke sa na résistance
ya ukele ngituka kiteki ya balo na kati ya nzo mpembe yai yokele la boloko ve yokele mbote keshinga mbote kwaku na ntoto ya Kongo benu tabebisa yao matondo mama Zwani.
Peto kwendaka kuzenga muchindu ya mache kutubaka waikivu kendima kuvutulila betu balo yakendima kuvutulila betu ntoto na betu beto kebika yani anotage ale ba policier
ba mama ba papa plantation benu baka fimbu ntango melunga betu pesa nzo yai ndola benu bula ndi fimbu mama Zwani metuba bobetanga susu te na ndeko na bino moninga na bino bobetanga susu te nakomi ndeko na bino bolimbisa ngai beno lolula munu mutasala odi akavei na musala beno yambi kala benu zola olimbisa ngai naza ndeko na bino nakomi mpe moninga na bino pardonnez-le-moi nazofuta ngo nga moko na ndimi bozosepela nazorendre mabele na bino nalobi nazozongisela bino biloko na bino ya zero baninga na ngai nyonso ndenga na moli pasi boye bazozongisa yango bozala siri na yango mpe tokomi bondeko
Right. So this is you've seen a theater piece, a performance piece, written and played and performed and filmed, etc. by CATPC. It was written by Siddhartha Masala, most notably. And this is another group portrait of several members of the Congolese Plantation Workers Art League. The person who wrote it is the one smiling on the right-hand side with the dreadlocks. And under Siddhartha Masala, under him is Mbuku Kimpala. To his left is Mathieu Kassiama. There's Ernest Kawata, Jeremy Mabiala, and a number of other people. The collective now has some 25 members. But 300 people are living and working on the land that the CATPC has so far been buying back with the proceeds of their artwork. I would like to take a step back. How did this all come to be? As you saw in the video, and it's true, many, if not most, of the key contemporary art museums in Europe have been funded with labor from plantations. And I'm an artist. I'm from the Netherlands. I'm Dutch. As a young art student in my early 20s, my dream, of course, was to exhibit in the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam or in the Van Abbe Museum in Eindhoven, or, God forbid, in Tate Modern in London. And so it came to quite, yeah, as a, it felt like it would be very disingenuous to, on the one hand, have this ambition as a young white male, etc., artists, to exhibit in any of those museums, and on the other hand, not acknowledge or understand the structural conditions of the museum. And of course, there's the whole lineage of institutional critique that has been working on that for 50 years now. And yet it seems that this institutional critique in many ways has been and is still provincial in the way that it only impacts a small group of people that is very close to the institution, that lives in a 10-kilometer perimeter around any of those museums. It seems that the communities that have paid for the museums through their labor have never, ever been invited to think about the museum, have never been invited to take any of the benefits from the museum, or destroy the museum, or whatever else it may be that artists are entitled to articulate. So I, some 15 years ago, decided that that program needed to be there. So in a way, I took on the cloak or the mantle of the museum. I impersonated, if you will, the museum with all its inner contradictions, of course, and tried to establish a program that would not only reach out, but build what an art museum could be with the communities on the plantations. And I understand that's a megalomaniac enterprise. It should be forbidden. Only a white man from Northwestern Europe with, state funding could do it. And that's, of course, part of the inner contradictions of the museum. And that's why I also needed to do it. Just a little bit of backdrop. This is the Stedelijk Museum. The Stedelijk Museum, I'll take it as an example, is just one of the many museums that has been brick by brick paid for by labor extracted from plantations. It's not the only one, but it's an interesting case study because, Amsterdam is not just was a colonial power, it quote unquote controlled Indonesia, but it also developed the financial institutions and frameworks through which finance capital still operates. So the Stedelijk Museum was not only funded by profits that were extracted then from plantations, mostly in Indonesia. Do you hear the dogs barking behind me, or is it okay? It's okay? Do you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Because I have like little dogs, they're barking all the time. Okay.
It's all right.
So the Stedelijk Museum, of course, was built brick by brick by some wealthy Dutch families in the 1890s. They all made their capital out of plantations in Indonesia, tobacco, coffee mostly. But not only that, the biggest chunk of the capital through which the Stedelijk Museum was built was derived from the speculation on future profits from plantations. So not just whatever money would be made out of producing and selling coffee and tobacco, but also what in 5 or 10 or 100 years from then would be derived, extracted from plantation labor. Financial products were made around that, and these financial products, futures, if you will, were traded on the Amsterdam Stock Exchange. That all financial apparatus was developed in Amsterdam, and it's what financed the Stedelijk Museum. As a consequence, it's not just plantation labor 100 years ago that financed the Stedelijk Museum. It's the plantation labor that is happening now that retroactively or in the future towards the past funded the Stedelijk Museum, and that is still funding the Stedelijk Museum. This is a picture of the Amsterdam cocoa harbors, just 10 kilometers removed from the Stedelijk Museum, one of the biggest repositories of unpaid or barely paid labor in the world. 10 kilometers away from the Stedelijk Museum is one of the biggest stockpiles of barely paid labor in the world, the Amsterdam Cocoa Harbor, the biggest cocoa harbor in the world. It financed the Stedelijk Museum, it still finances the Stedelijk Museum. This is the Van Abbe Museum in Eindhoven. It's paid for by money extracted from mostly tobacco plantations in Indonesia. This is the Ludwig Museum in Cologne. Ludwig became extremely wealthy through chocolate, cocoa. And this, of course, is Tate Modern. We all know the story of Tate. Tate and Lyle was a big producer of cane sugar in the Caribbean. Tate did research and published it. They say that they were not involved in slave labor because slavery had already been abolished when Tate made his capital. But of course, the prism, the apparatus of the plantation system, whether it's formally through slavery or just through barely paid labor, was very much what financed the entire Tate Museum empire, including Tate Modern, which, as you know, was opened in 2000, and which had as its biggest and most visible exhibition series the Unilever series. Unilever, of course, a company that most people in the North know as a company that produces Magnum ice creams or shampoo. But of course, this is all from plantations. So the Unilever series in Tate Modern, which as probably the biggest and best visited exhibition in the world ever, amongst others, Ai Weiwei, was funded by Unilever and therefore by plantation labor. Now, in the case of this Congolese Plantation Workers Art League, they work and live in Lusanga in central Congo. Now, Lusanga used to be Leverville. It was literally named after William Lever, the guy that founded Unilever. And this is the Lady Lever Gallery in Liverpool, where you have the biggest collection of pre-Raphaelite paintings in the world. Paintings that, you know, when England was industrializing, would at the same time cherish femininity and love and a pre-industrial society based on nature and spirituality. Now, these museums, I want to repeat, as far as I know, and I may be mistaken, but as far as I know, none of the directors of those museums ever went to any of the communities who still work and live on those plantations. Because again, it's not just 100 years ago, it's ongoing. Those museums were built on the promise of continued extraction from those plantations. It's built on speculation on the future. The future is obviously now. That future that these museums have been built on are the plantations as they are operating now. None of those museum directors, I spoke with many of them. Caspar Koenig, before he died, unfortunately, was of course the director of the Ludwig Museum. I asked him a few years ago, did he ever visit the plantations? He's, you know, was a big advocate of institutional critique. We all know that, and fantastic exhibitions. However, never ever did he reach out or visit or basically investigate the infrastructure, the extractive mechanisms through which art, as he knew it, was funded. He never visited them. He never took even an interest in visiting them. The same is true for the people that ran the Unilever series at Tate Modern, without naming too many names. It even goes for Charles Esche, the director of the Van Abbe Museum, who, you know, I love and who I think did very important work, still never visited any of the plantations that funded the very building in which he had his decolonial programs. Now, on those plantations, we'll speak about it later, conditions are very, very dire. Those plantations are based on monoculture. Anything that goes against profit maximization of one single plant will be forbidden actively. Police and the army will make sure that nothing happens that does not lead to profit maximization. Now, museums in that way, by never, in my mind, or in my experience, in my research, never reaching out to those working class communities that funded the museum and still fund the museum, they actually build a wall of invisibility between art and the working class communities that funded it and continue to fund it. And in that way, they are no different than those companies like Unilever or like Nestle. This is, I don't know what's his name, George Clooney. He builds a wall of invisibility. You look at George Clooney when you want to choose which type of coffee you're going to drink. And what he renders invisible are the communities behind it, is the labor behind it. This is a Magnum ice cream advertisement. She's a wonderful, beautiful lady. What she renders invisibly, paid for by Unilever, is the conditions on the plantation, the communities on the plantation. And my argument is that by never engaging with those communities, museums, even if the wall of invisibility is now called decoloniality, even if it's called care, repair, healing, the mere fact that they never, as far as I know, ever went to those communities living and working on those plantations builds a wall of invisibility. And so in effect, this is kind of, the value chain of contemporary art. You have plantations, destruction of the environment, destruction of communities, art stolen, obviously, everything set up in such a way, destroyed and then reset up in such a way that it leads to profit maximization. Products extracted from it, palm oil, sugar, cocoa, etc., etc. Money has obviously been made with that. A part of that money is reinvested in museums. The museums built this wall of invisibility, not through advertisement, but even through critical, engaged art. Artists take a main role in that, and then around that, new economies emerge, the hipster economies, gentrification, etc. Now, the interesting thing about this little diagram is that you see that no single arrow is pointing back to the communities on the plantations, right? They are not there, supposedly. And all of this is, of course, it's a small little analysis, and you could make these types of analysis of many industries. But of course, I'm an artist. I'm interested in art. I take the museum, the art museum, especially the ones that I like, as spars pro toto for the world. These are the places that allow us to investigate the world. And yet, as I pointed out, the people who paid for the museum have never been invited. The Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam and the Tate and etc., they make shows about colonialism, about care, about healing, but so far never ever inviting those communities to be part of them. They are not represented. And so the big risk is that these museums, even if they benefited so much from colonialism, they now equally stand to benefit from decolonization, whereas the people who paid the biggest price for colonialism, the people in the mines on the plantations, whether through formal slavery or other systems of extraction, they again pay the price and are again rendered invisible. So, of course, every single museum director will tell you that this is not true. They will say, no, we have these new programs about inclusivity, diversity. The Stedelijk Museum, again, as an example, has made formal policies that 50% of their new acquisitions or a certain percentage of the people that they show will be from the Global South. And here I want to bring in what Olufemo Taiwo, the philosopher, calls elite capture. The phenomena in which a small group of people, a small group of artists, is handpicked by those institutions, by the curators in those institutions. Sometimes the curators themselves have been handpicked to curate shows. Now more and more, and it's fantastic and it's long overdue, people from the communities or from the Global South who would previously be excluded from the room, the literary, the museum, the room. However, the conditions outside of the room remain fundamentally unchanged. So in a way, these artists are asked by those institutions to carry the burden that really the museum should carry. The burden to engage with the communities that funded them is now sidelined or is given to, I don't know, we can name any number of examples, fantastic artists. And they are then part of the elite network of the museum, of the room, if you will. They can definitely have a lot of influence within the room, but they are asked to stand in for larger communities who themselves are never, ever invited in the room. And the price that is being paid is that working class interests are being sacrificed. And of course, this is a long discussion. I was recently rereading a little chapter of a Susan Buck-Morss book on the origins of negative dialectics. These are discussions that date back to the 1930s, right? Is the artist somebody who should just exhibit, show the inequities in the world, or is the artist's role to include or even pass the baton to working class communities for them to decide what art is? Benjamin, Adorno, Brecht, etc. Is a division of labor necessary? Should a few artists be handpicked to then stand in for the class struggles of the world? Or is that in and of itself a type of fascism? And is the way to really do it to change the material conditions of working class communities? And is everything that leads up to that, is that revolutionary art, or is that critical art? Not just signaling critique, but actually working with the communities, or even more importantly, passing the baton to those communities. So that's maybe the answer, like what's up with this Renzo guy? I tried to, with many mistakes, I'm sure, mistakes that stem from me because of my character, my biases, etc. Mistakes that come from whom I am in this world as a white male Western European beneficiary of global inequality. But also mistakes that simply come from the fact that I try to put on the mantle of the art museum with all the already, quite well-known internal contradictions of the art museum. One of those internal contradictions, of course, that art museums, on the one hand, regardless of the problem I just mentioned, at large, we all know there is a problem with gentrification. There is a problem with art museums being beholden by, the 0.001%, even in social democratic countries. All those problems we have, predate this discussion on decoloniality. They date from the 1970s, 80s, 90s. And yet we know that even the biggest new podiums or for all these discussions have been, they are set up by and large by investors, companies, by curators, by et cetera, if and when they can claim that it will be good for the market. Tate Modern would not have existed if it was not also good for the market. I don't know how it is for the Tehran Summit, but by and large, art is funded, can carve out a safe space for itself, for all these discussions, if it's also beneficial to the powers that be. Let's call it gentrification, yeah? So my first step in this was to go to one of those plantations that funded Tate Modern, a Unilever plantation, monoculture, $9 a month for a full-time job in 2012. And I started what I called at the time a reverse gentrification program, the attempt for the benefits of critical art not to accrue only in and around Tate Modern or the likes, but also on the plantations that funded Tate Modern. And of course, we needed Richard Florida to help us out a little bit. Of course, many other people spoke, but Florida helped understand what we needed to do to stay safe and be funded. That didn't last very long. After only 9 months, the whole program was shut down by the company managers in London. They confiscated whatever artwork had been made, whatever infrastructure had been built by the community, but paid for by Dutch art funding, I must admit, was destroyed and taken away. We started again, of course, on another former Unilever plantation that had by then been already abandoned by Unilever because all the profits were already extracted. This is the city of Leverville that I mentioned earlier. And CATPC was founded, Congolese Plantation Workers Art League. I got OMA involved, which is like a Dutch, architecture firm that is very well known for building white cubes all over the world. So that it would have the right type of legitimacy, so it could be funded, so that, et cetera, we needed to kind of employ all the normal tricks in the book that any other art museum employs, not just because we actually needed those tricks, but also because we wanted to represent what art museums do, how they operate, what their inner contradictions are. Then a white cube was built. Here it is. But most importantly, CATPC started to make really incredible artwork. And I want to show now another little film. Doesn't seem to open. Please bear with me. I'm sorry. I'm dealing with some technical issues. I'll try and resolve it. Yeah.
Mbulu mapapa pana. Wale mtoto asakre bete kwa tavena. Ukusa wovana pepe na betu, na ukusa na betu na kufutua na betu. Donc, ceci qui implie avec un bagan totoi, et avec mes soyaux, donc, bete ku di koti sa ba ide na betu nyos na kati na yo, message na beto, akam na betu nyos tu, après, kaka yo mosh ka ba mbe ide ina, yo se multiplie, yo se transforme ba mbongo,
Renzo, we cannot see the video.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, not sure what's going on, but
I'll try again.
okay.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
Oh, I apologize. Okay, good. We try again.
Mbulu mapapa pana. Wale mtoto asakre bete kwa tavena. Ukusa wovana pepe na betu, na ukusa na betu na kufutua na betu. Donc, ceci qui implie avec un bagan totoi, et avec mes soyaux, donc, bete kudikotisa ba ide na betu nyonso na kati na yo message na beto makambo na betu nyonso tu après kaka yo moshi ka bambe ide ina yo se multiplier yo se transformer bambongo na betu racheter dia makambo betu sumba dia makambo hectare mingi betu futula mfinda
tongi mise na biso wa équipe na kati ya post plantation mabele oyo tosombi na mbongo oyo toganye na biteki totongi mise wana na bapartenaire na biso baza na mboka Amsterdam. Na Amsterdam tomoni kuna ezali na plus grand port ya cacao na monde. Ezali penza esika oyo penza bazali kozwa biloko pe ya plantation, mais ya plantation ezozonga te. Komono culture nte bome biso mabele komisi yango aride. Na sima ya misala na biso mabele wana kaya kokufa tosaleli yango biteki touti kozongisa mabele na biso susu na bomoi na nzela ya a pe na nzela ya bilanga na biso tozozongisa forêt sacrée eza na espoir pote totelemaki tosali mosala wana vraiment eza loya lo na histoire
bantu mingi mona boye hata ba benediction par rapport au tout bande mumuna ndiame kuma muda apidia moye kuna veningi ndamu taja mufe ba mingi mo yuna boye jinga ven sor boye nuna ata mage bobo menge feto ni muge kuna nti amugaje ko yo sava tena malila bitoko malila bitoko penza yango to kufa ndogite kufa ndoginde ni nakata paradiso.
Yeah, so Cedar and other members of CATPC spoke about it. It's a short excerpt of a longer film that is in the making. But the excerpt was also shown at the Venice Biennial. So CATPC started to make art, and from 2014 on, and it has led to a lot somehow. Again, this is a group of people who live and work on this Unilever plantation, and established in 2014. And they made all of a sudden in 2017 what the New York Times called the best show of the year in Sculpture Center. And sculptures made in clay out of, the earth, the soil of the plantation, but then infused with all this. Yeah, I can't describe it. It's not my art, of course, but what I see is it's infused with so much intention, and they're like objects of they're accusatory objects. They're storytelling. They're stories of accusation, but there's also stories of healing in it, in the way that they're always looking forward, not just in their quote unquote storytelling, but also in the way that obviously the money that is made through the production or sales of these sculptures goes to CATPC after they give their share to the gallery. That's the way it goes. And they buy back their own land. And they built a museum on the land. This is a Ibrahim Mahama installation on the White Cube. Ibrahim, who's now also doing in Bern during the big installation, the Kunsthalle Bern is now packed in Ibrahim Mahama's cocoa bags, which is fantastic. You know, it refers to Christo. It refers to when attitude becomes form. And in 1969, I believe, a show, it should be said by Harold Zeeman, that was also funded by plantation labor. It was funded by Philip Morris at the time. That's tobacco, that's plantations. But CATPC makes all these works and has by now been buying, I believe, 400 hectares of land. And of course, people will say, why buy it? Why do they need to buy their own land? Why not just take it? People do try to take their land in Congo and in many other places of the world. And I think we all know examples what happens next. People are assassinated, abducted, killed. So buying is the cheapest option. And they buy it with their art. And then, of course, this all led to the Dutch pavilion at the Venice Biennial. So my role, again, was simply to be the stand-in, the cloak of the museum. That's my little role. I carried this Dutch passport. The director of the Dutch Art Foundation said, like, hey, do you want to do it? I said, sure, I'll do it. I'll open the door. And so it was a CATPC solo show with other sculptures reproduced in products from the plantation, right? The originals always remain in Lusanga. They're made of soil. They're returned to the soil. But copies, clones, as they call them, have been made through 3D scans and reproduction in Amsterdam, again, biggest cocoa harbor in the world, with products from the plantation, palm oil, sugar, etc., cocoa. All these sculptures are worth talking about for at least 15, 20 minutes. I can't within this framework, and also I'm not the expert here. But they're allegorical sculptures about, you know, capitalism, about indigenous knowledge, about healing the land, about the pain, and about what needs to happen next. But they're not just signaling that. As I said, every one of those sculptures is quite literally the seed to buy back the land. This is Alphonse, who was the cheerleader, if you will, at the opening. Interestingly, the Ballot sculpture, it was mentioned in the video I first showed, the judgment of the White Cube, which was kind of an indictment of the White Cube, performance piece by the community, by CATPC. The Ballot sculpture, you see it here. It was visible in the Dutch pavilion in Venice, but only through a live stream, because it was actually in Lusanga in the White Cube. It, after many years, came back to the plantation, which was exceptionally meaningful because the sculpture itself had been made in 1931 as an act of resistance against the plantation apparatus, against Unilever, really. But then it disappeared. It was in an American museum, and it never came back until, you know, the argument could be made that it was going to be part of the Venice Biennial. Then the museum couldn't deny alone. So there was a live stream from Venice to Lusanga. It was a dual exhibition. The original sculptures were all in Lusanga, and the clones reproduced in palm fat, cocoa sugar, and also a live stream of the Ballot sculpture as it was in Lusanga was visible in Venice. This is just an image of the originals. On the one left-hand side, you see a sculpture by Mathieu Kassiyama. It's called The Crucifixion of the Art Collector. It's an art collector. He's been crucified. It's made in earth from the plantation. And it's with those sculptures that CATPC is now quite literally getting back the means of production, which is not just limited to the land. The land is the most important to CATPC. When I imagined a reverse gentrification program, when I imagined that the museum should try and establish a program, however fraught, with the communities that funded it, there's no denying that it needs to happen. I could have never imagined that these types of artworks would be made, or that the main return to CATPC would be that they would buy back their own land. This is, not something I imagined. And then, power. CATPC is now in the Power Top 100, the art review thing, which is kind of, it's fun, but I think it's it's really relevant. It's really relevant that they are there, because I can't think of any other instance of a working class global South community claiming the right to art and then entering in the Power Top 100, especially not if they're not just any working class, but working class on the effing plantations that funded Tate Modern and other museums. So I think what it really does altogether, the project, or my contribution to the project, as somebody who had this intuition, like we need to engage with and especially listen museums. When I say we in this instance, it's museums. There is no way they can claim to decolonize, to care about care, repair, healing, if they don't actually do it. And so I would think that it is really not only saving CATPC, this community of now 300 people, to some degree, it's mostly saving the museum, and its dignity. And so in that respect, this is the land that CATPC has been buying back, 400 hectares. There's a river running through it, and hundreds of people are living off it now. And it's owned by the community, right? I want to repeat that. It's not owned by anybody else. And so to end the talk, but also to point at the way forward, maybe, there's one last video that I would love to share with you. And again, may take a little minute before I manage to do that. I don't know why. Okay, there we go. It's getting there. You see it?
Nama saya Tai. Ini semuanya yang ikut mengerjakan ini adalah anak cucu dari kakek nenek yang dulunya itu ikut kerja di perkebunan Belanda itu, supaya tujuannya untuk membangkitkan ekonomi mereka masing-masing.
Ini makan.
Tambah.
Bon café.
Un monde n'a pas comme celui-ci, comme ça, like comme ça.
Nous, on travaille aussi dans la plantation.
Regarde, maman. Botala maboko na ngai.
Sama-sama.
Oyo wana mosusu. Oyo ezali musée Stedelijk na Pays-Bas. Tosali recherche musée oyo tongami na plantation ya awa, place tozali awa plantation oyo tongami na makasi ya bakoko na bino pe bino moko awa.
Saya mau menanyakan seperti ini, kan katanya Mas tadi, mas-mas dari Kongo ini kan, Mas Mbak ini kan mau pidato di museum itu. Nah, kalau bisa di dalam pidato itu, inilah, apakah bisa seperti ini? Inilah museum dari hasil jerih payah nenek moyang Maduarjo, ini kopinya, seperti itu.
Eza malamu mingi koteka kafe, tukoki kobeta masolo pe na ba produit oyo biso tozosala yango na forme ya art. Awa neti na biteki oyo eza na mafuta mbila, eza na chocolat, cacao, eza pe na sucre, nyonso eza ba produit ya plantation. Mais tokoko kolisa imagination na biso pe musika pona komema biloko moko ya sika tokobeta masolo oyo ya biso na plantation tokotisa yango na kati ya musée.
Si nous sommes trop limités avec l'huile de palme, on ne sera pas ici avec eux pour parler, pour s'échanger comme ça. Mais avec l'art, en tout cas, ça donne aussi d'autres émotions et d'autres options. Surtout comme na art, tout ça, nde tozwa porte ya kokotela kuna na musée, tozwa facilité, comme na facilité ya ko déclarer ba droit. Art eza bien, eza esengo, eza goût, ce que oyebi yango maîtriser, eza goût pour esangisaka. Oza na connaissance pour créer famille par rapport à famille oya yo botami na famille ya art eleki. Traduire nanu wana.
Ote toza na droit ya kokotisa biteki awa po ezali musée na yo. Evre na lisolo mobimba pona kokotisa yango. Eza pe malamu.
Semua ini kerjasama kan bertujuan tidak hanya sebatas di hari ini, di kesenian, mungkin di budaya, mungkin di pertanian. Lah, untuk dipromosikan di museum itu, lah untuk menuju akses sana, ini yang menyambungkan siapa? Saya rasa nanti sepulangnya sampean dari sini, ini tidak ada manfaatnya lagi.
Kochana nu volonté, ko biso to chaki volonté yango na tokomi kuna. So ibo che volonté, wala biso nyonso, to cha maboko biso nyonso.
Batu bekas pondasi tempat penggorengan kopi pada saat zaman Belanda masih berkebun di Zon Maduarjo.
Batu ya musée. Batu ya musée, ba curateur, ba directeur, ba directrice, o ya musée. Est-ce que bayana noawa po koya ko tuna makambwa bino boko sala pe na boko sala pe biteki est bayana ndenge to yeboe bakoma deja.
Jadi jawaban saya hanya satu aja, tidak pernah sama sekali ada tamu yang datang memberitahukan museum di sana dibangun dari penghasilan sini, belum pernah sama sekali. Biasanya datang ya cuman lihat kopinya, nanti akan dipasarkan cuma gitu aja.
Na tango tokoloba libanga ya fondation ya musée oyo ezali nde awa na kati ya ndako na yo, na kati ya mboka na yo, o makambo nyonso etongi ndako oyo eutaki nde awa na bakoko na yo pe na yo moko. Fondation penje ezali awa ya Stedelijk na Pays-Bas ezali awa.
I humbly apologize. I do not understand why the directors of the museum invite all kinds of people to do something in the museum and never you and the other people. And I apologize for it.
Saya pahami atas permohonan maaf, museum ini kelasnya masih di tingkat rendah. Ayo kita angkat sama-sama. Jadi yang di Belanda, ayo kita junjung agar martabatnya tidak rendah. Nah, dengan kami menjunjung martabat museum yang di sana bisa terangkat, ya kami mohon untuk yang di sini diangkat juga, itu poinnya gitu. Kerjasama di sisi apapun, mungkin di bidang seni, budaya, pertanian dan lain sebagainya. Nah ini nanti bisa kita wadahi bersama-sama.
Jadi, saya Pak foto ini apa sana? Bapak di sini biar kelihatan. Tiga lagi, yang banyak ya. 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. Lagi ya. 1, 2, 3. Gaya bebas sekali lagi. 1, 2. Iya.
Sambil.
So I think the problem of exclusion of working class communities is not limited to the communities who actually paid for the museum. In the case of the Stedelijk Museum, communities of plantation workers in Indonesia. If we speak about CATPC, it's connected to museums mostly in the UK. It, of course, in my mind, also concerns working class communities within the centers of empire. And I think those walls of invisibility that obviously Unilever builds, right? Those advertisements that I showed that render invisible, that make impossible a connection between the consumers of a Magnum ice cream and the people who work on the plantations, the people who eat the chocolate and the people who produce the chocolate. That wall of invisibility, again, I think it's not just the companies like Unilever that build that wall. I think the museums could actively help dismantle those walls if they would invite everybody that contributed to the museum. So that would also be the bricklayers and the people who, built, who dug the foundations and who painted the walls white. Many of them do not feel welcome in the museum. And I think, with CATPC and also with my contributions trying to just take on that mantle of the museum in places where so far it felt it didn't need to. I think we, in a way, make a beginning of cracking that code. Yes, communities of plantation workers have a lot to say about art, can use art probably in better ways than any other community that I know of on the planet, actively rebuilding the sacred forest that was destroyed to make the plantations. So I think that code can be cracked. That code since the 1930s, like, is art in the hands of some avant-garde or should it be in the hands of the proletariat? Can it be in the hands of both? How to deal with that? I'm no expert in the matter. I only think that the actions that CATPC and I and other people have been taking together are in and of themselves analytical. And I think the next step is to build a global switchboard. It could be a museum. Maybe this should become the function of the museum, to become a global switchboard for all the communities that have contributed to the museum, rather than excluding them, rather than handpicking who gets to say what. I think then and only then the museum can indeed become a vibrant place for the art of the 21st century. Thank you.